sitting down in a theater last night and watching Northman, like on a big screen with a bunch of people. It's just the best experience. Well, wasn't my first time back in a theater in 2 years, though. I've seen a few movies already. What was your first time back in a theater? What'd you go see?
I think it was it Compartment Number 6, the Finnish film?
Okay.
That's a really good film, by the way, if you haven't seen it. Really, really great. Yeah, that would have been it.
Nice. When you go to the movies, what's your favorite thing? What's your go-to? Like, what brings you out to the theater?
Well, pretty much anything. Anything from like small art house projects to big tentpole event movies.
Yeah, just being out there is nice. It's just good with everything's better with a crowd. Than like last night, you could feel it. You're immersed in it with.
And to be out to do, we've been on a press tour now for a week, and it's been just the most amazing feeling to be actually out meeting people and talking about it in person. And to be wearing pants while doing interviews for the first time in 2 years, because I've been like in a bathrobe.
I'm not gonna lie, I've been doing the same thing. You know, it's business on top, but when we're on Zoom, I don't know, I might have a pair of shorts
take our
on.
Pants off now. It'd be fine.
We'll probably get a lot more views if we're. When you walk into the theater last night, or you see posters for this movie, speaking about clothes, it is you. And you're shirtless, and it's abs, and it's not your first time having your physique on display in a film. Does that feel kind of strange ever to know that like everybody's seeing you? And I mean, people love it. What does that feel like?
Everything about it feels strange. It's just overwhelming. It's so crazy. It's been a very long journey getting to tonight when we had the UK premiere, it was an emotional moment for sure. Not seeing myself naked, but but just being there with Anya and Rob and Sean and getting a movie made is difficult. Getting a big movie made is even more difficult, and getting a big movie made by an auteur filmmaker is close to impossible. So I'm just filled with gratitude that we're sitting here.
For training for this one, did you have to do anything different? Because you guys were outside, you guys were on location. I mean, it's a very physical role, and like I said, you're no stranger to physical roles where there's action and everything. But this one just feels different. Like what Robert brought to this, everything feels authentic. Like, did that call for anything different from you for getting ready?
We try to incorporate a lot of the stuff that my character would do in the film into the training. We started about 5 months before principal of photography, and that obviously for the fight scenes, we try to incorporate some of that stuff, the sword and axe. Not that I brought a sword and an axe to the gym, but similar movements. But also Amleth, when he is on the farm as one of Fjolnir's slaves, the type of hard labor that he would do on the farm, pulling things, carrying boulders, that kind of stuff. We try to incorporate that into the training.
Yeah, and I've heard you were a Vikings fan, like the idea of Vikings films before this film. This is one you've wanted to make for a while. What is it about Vikings and kind of what they bring to a cinematic adventure that appealed to you?
Well, it's in my blood. I grew up in Sweden. I grew up literally surrounded by runestones. So it's been a dream since I was a boy. And it's about 10 years ago when I started thinking about trying to put together a Viking film. I think that thought was born out of, I realized I hadn't seen I'd never seen a great, truthful depiction of the Viking Age, of Viking, of Norse mythology, of how they lived, how they related to the gods, to the spiritual world, and I was excited about the possibility of maybe trying to make a big epic movie, but that stayed true to the old sagas.
It seems like you guys did both. Like you check both those boxes. It's epic, and it seems. I've talked to Neil, and he seems to believe this is pretty accurate. And like, did you learn anything about this that you didn't already know before about Vikings lore? Because I know that that's like a big picture also that isn't totally filled in. They historically, like, they always find something like, well, we're piecing it together still. Yeah. Did you get to learn any of those pieces that have been discovered that you didn't know?
No, absolutely. A lot about, and much thanks to Neil Price and his lectures and his books. Children of Ash and Elm was my Viking Bible during pre-production and the shoot. It's an incredible read, and it deals with the everyday life of the Vikings, but also their belief system, their connection to the gods, to the spiritual world, and that is it's a big aspect that I had to understand, because in the movie, that is such a big component of the film, the spiritual, the supernatural, and the relationship between Amleth and the supernatural. The fact that to him it wasn't supernatural. In order to make that feel real, I had to understand how someone like Amleth 1,000 years ago would perceive nature around him, the spirits in nature, the spirits within himself, the gods, their relationship to each other, and all that, to how that was connected. His relationship to fate, his belief in fate, was crucial to kind of wrap my head around.
In the sequence with the ritual where you're wearing the wolf skin, and I mean, you just like turn into an animal in that sequence. You turn into the berserker and get ready for the raid. First of all, your performance was incredible, but you're talking about this is in your blood. Like, do you feel like you connected to it in that way? Like, did something help? Like, what did you find to bring that out? Because this performance is insane.
I highly recommend doing that to anyone. Basically, it's it's very cathartic to let the inner animal, the more atavistic side of you out. And I'm generally quite a mellow guy, so. That was 100% a cathartic experience. So maybe not do it at home in front of friends and family, but go out into the woods and find your inner beast and just let it out.
Yeah, as soon as I get home, I'm just gonna and then I'm gonna go right up.
I'll hear a roar from the lobby.
There goes Brandon. He took my advice. I knew it. I thought he'd wait.
The beast is out.
One thing I love about the film is like there is nobody in the film who's outright like right. Like, it's a lot of gray areas. We have characters who we root for, but they're also all conflicted in their own ways. Does that make it more fun to you to like find that meat and chew on that? Because like it adds a level of complexity, in my opinion.
Yeah, we wanted to base the story on a very clear traditional revenge story. It's based on a story called Prins Hamlet of Jutland from the 12th century that. And that is the story that Shakespeare based Hamlet on, and it's a very clear narrative. But we wanted to set out with the clear notion of like, oh, this is the good guy, this is the bad guy, but then without revealing what happens, to kind of blur those lines a bit and show make it a bit more, find some more complexity to it, and make it a bit more, hopefully a bit more engaging for the audience, and maybe a bit confusing, because again, the characters are confused, and there's good and bad and light and darkness in all of them.
Yeah, I think it was really cool that we saw Viking Sport in the movie. I know Neil Price was saying that like one of his favorite things about the Vikings TV show, he said they're not super accurate in how they depict it, but he was happy that they showed a world that Vikings live in and they have life outside of raiding and the things that are typically associated with Vikings. This world feels lived in. This world we saw sport and games and things like that. I loved to hear about crafting the sequence. I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, but that sequence also gets intense like most things in this movie do. Yeah. Did you learn how to play a sport? Did you guys establish rules on set and kind of find a back and forth to do that?
No, it was, again, Rob, with the help of Neil Price and the other Viking scholars and historians that consulted on the film, wanted that to be as accurate as historically possible. So it was down to what the balls would look like, the clubs, and how it was played. Just try to find just learn everything we could about how that game was going to be played. And it was a painful week because I Hafthor is the main guy of the opposing team, and it's basically the mountain from Game of Thrones, and he is a gentle giant, a lovely man, a massive giant from Iceland, but literally the world's strongest man, and that's the guy I had to fight. So even when he was trying to just like not lean into it and put his weight into it and just like push me gently, I flew. I mean, he's massive.
Large fella.
He's a large fella. So it was a great week, but man, I was in a lot of pain after that.
Well, I appreciate your work, man. The last time somebody led an Eggers film, they went on to become Batman. Would you ever do a superhero? Are you a comic fan at all? Because we love comics at Comicbook.com, so I have to ask.
I think it's a difficult question to answer. I take one project at a time, and if the components are there, if it's a character that fascinates me and a filmmaker I'm excited to work with, then it could be a big franchise movie or a tiny little Swedish indie film. It's just about finding that right chemistry.
Sure. How many times a day does that question come up nowadays?
Sometimes, a couple of times a day.
My favorite sequence in the film was the sequence where you were raiding the village, and it's a continuous shot. You catch a spear, you throw it back, you go, and the camera just follows you through this village. I know that's not all done in one take. How many days did it take to get this? I mean, it's probably 3 minutes long, but I imagine that was weeks of choreography and filming on set.
Yeah.
Intense.
We started working on that months before shooting the sequence. Again, because it is almost a dance between the camera and the actors, and we're both moving and at quite a high pace. You know, we're running, at least in the beginning of the sequence, where I'm running and the camera is running, and then climbing and jumping. So it's technically quite challenging to get that in one shot. And again, there are no cutaways, there are no second cameras, so you have to meticulously plan that whole sequence down to, tons of actors. We had 30, 40 stuntmen, we had 300 extras, we had horses. Rob wanted chickens fly through the screen. Of course, you need some chickens if it's an action scene. So
those are his doves.
There were a lot of things that could have gone wrong and did. So months before we started working on the choreography of it, and then with the stunt team work on all the different fights, sequence by sequence, and then try to piece them together so we would have some fluidity to it. In order to our characters are in a berserker rage state of mind during that sequence, so there's no real opportunity to figure things out on the day. You just kind of have to be incredibly well prepared when you get there, so that when we shoot, it flows. So it was challenging, but also incredibly exciting because it was such a challenge and in a good way. Normally, when you shoot action sequences, it's a lot of stop and go and bits and pieces and little insert here and there, and then long coffee breaks in between. It is thrilling when you get to do the whole thing from the beginning to the end.